Okay, so the first time I talked about this whole thing, it was more of a just genuine reaction thing. This one, we're going to be doing more of a deep dive, I guess. How does the NBA recover from this long break, which they said was 30 days a couple days ago, so 29, 28 days from now, whatever. In a perfect world, we can pick up right there, and maybe there'd have to be games in empty arenas. I mean, a lot of this is just waiting and seeing. So perhaps the empty arena thing could be real, but even if it is that, or maybe there actually are fans in the stands, or maybe arenas are half full, I don't know how you would do that, but I don't know. I mean, the NBA does not want to have empty games, of course, even if health is still the number one priority. But let's say if games are really back 30 days from now, and there's a decent chance it'll be longer than that, but we'll say best case scenario. Are we just going to skip all of the games that would have been played in that time frame? Because the playoffs were projected to begin about mid-April. So would we just give every team a couple of regular season games and then get into the playoffs? Would we have some sort of tournament for the lower seeds? I mean, have teams that are on the bubble even earned being in some sort of a tournament? I mean, I guess this could be viewed as sort of a subjective thing. I mean, if we look at the Eastern Conference playoffs right now, the Wizards are 5.5 games back. Do we really need to run some sort of a tournament to determine the last couple of seeds there, or can we just freeze the standings and go with the Magic at number 8? For the Western Conference, 3.5 game difference between the Grizzlies and the Blazers and the Pelicans and the Kings. It's pretty close there. So maybe there you'd have to do it, but if you're going to do it for the West, then you got to do it for the East. So that all gets kind of tricky, and I don't really know what the right move would be there. I guess a small tournament could be a nice way to jumpstart the league again, you know, something to anticipate rather than just, hey guys, we're back to normal and there's 5 games left in the season and then we're going into the playoffs. I don't really know. The one thing is, there are still some close races within the postseason, like of established teams. I mean, between the Nuggets at 3 and the Rockets at 6, it's only a 2.5 game difference, so if we just stopped all of those teams' games that went into the playoffs, then in a way, would that be spoiling the postseason standings a little bit? Maybe. The Nuggets are a game and a half behind the Clippers for the 2 seed, so it's difficult. I don't know what the right answer would be. I don't know if anybody knows what the exact right answer would be, but I can understand wanting to give teams a few games before the playoffs, because if we just throw teams right into these high intense games, regardless of whether there's fans in the arena or not, that'd be pretty difficult. I mean, we're talking about not just health in terms of the obvious, but we're talking about health from a physical standpoint. If you're going to give these guys that much time off and then throw them right back into the fire, that's going to be tough. So we'll see what happens there. As far as just this long break in terms of rest and injury stuff, that becomes very interesting because, you know, Paul George and Kawhi have been dealing with stuff all year. LeBron getting a month off might be the biggest cheat code in the league. I mean, Giannis has barely played this year because of how many blowouts the Bucks have had. The Celtics have had injury problems all season. One guy's out one day, a different guy's out another day. Kemba's going through a knee thing right now. Marc Gasol has been out for a while with the Raptors, so it is possible for teams to kind of get their best guys out there with this long break. I mean, Embiid and Ben Simmons have dealt with stuff recently. Ben Simmons still has the back thing. The biggest one in the room might be Kevin Durant on the Nets, although that one, I don't really know if KD would come back, but that would also require us to be going perhaps a little farther into the summer than the NBA would really like, because, I mean, if the playoffs began late April, that would only be, 2 weeks behind what it would have already been if it wasn't for this whole big break, so we'll have to see. That's the biggest thing. We're going to have to see. I mean, so much of this is unknown. How could this affect next season? Well, it might start at a later time. If this season ends at a later time, we would imagine next season would end at a later time or begin at a later time, and to quote Zach Lowe on this one, I would hope that the NBA doesn't treat it as a lockout season where you're just trying to pack as many games in as possible. I think it'd be better to give the players and teams some room to breathe with days off and stuff. So these are all things the NBA is going to have to consider. I think another thing to take note of is even with the break and all that, if we're talking about the playoffs, it could make the playoffs really weird. I mean, we're talking about team chemistry and stuff. There's a chance that some previous favorites would not be able to gel together the way another team would that is maybe doesn't have as many wins, and suddenly we have a potential upset, and I think that could happen in either conference. So that type of stuff is could happen if you ask me. Granted, we could have gotten upsets in the West anyway, because that's just how the West usually is. I mean, hell, we're hearing this stuff now about Donovan Mitchell and Gobert having some sort of something. We'll have to see how that plays out. The salary cap, of course, could be affected, and if the cap is going to be, I mean, hell, even if it's $5 million lower than what it was previously estimated to be at, it could be a drastic difference. I mean, we got guys who, I mean, how many max contract dudes could there be in this free agency? I mean, AD, but he's going to sign with the Lakers, of course. Or maybe not even maxes, but like somebody like Montrezl Harrell, you know? This type of thing could drastically affect how much he gets this offseason. Drummond could be another one. Gordon Hayward, although I think he's going to accept his player option. Van Fleet is a very interesting one here. I mean, if the cap is going to be taking a hit, it's definitely possible with the potential of lost revenue from all this. Then some dudes who were previously going to get maybe somewhere in the 20s per year, they might get like 15 to 16 million a year or something, you know? And then that's going to impact teams for years. I mean, we're finally getting away from the summer of whatever year it was where the cap just immediately went up. Like, we're finally getting away from those contracts, you know, the Evan Turners and whoever else from that offseason. So if we have a bunch of decent players who are going to be making like $6 million less a year, or potentially more than they were previously going to get, that could be massive in terms of trades. Suddenly we have a bunch of really valuable contracts around the league, or whatever. I mean, DeMar DeRozan's an interesting one. You know, a story just came out about him, and, you know, he and the Spurs' potential negotiations, and there was already talk of how much is DeRozan really worth and stuff. So that's all going to be something to pay attention to. I mean, if the NBA walks out of this with no revenue lost, then that's pretty wild. I mean, I don't know how that happens, because we're talking about either less games or empty arenas. Like, I don't know what you do unless you just wanted to extend the season so far into the summer to get as many games in as possible, but who really knows? I guess some possible other things would be maybe 5-game series for the first couple of playoff rounds if we got to save some time, although I'm sure the league does not want to do that because that's a whole lot of potential money lost. I guess if we want to get real crazy, I mean, is it possible for the NBA to have sort of a pick and choose system where they look at various playoff standings around the league and they have like a one-gamer just to determine some things? So, for example, could you have the Thunder and the Rockets play each other in a one-game playoff because they're both at the same exact record? Even then, you could do their record versus each other, but is that fair if they haven't played all of their games against each other this season? So whoever wins that game gets the 5th seed, loser is the 6th seed. You could do the same thing with the Pacers and the 76ers in the Eastern Conference. Like, if the NBA wants to get that precise about things, then I guess there's nothing stopping them. There's no precedent for what you're supposed to do right now. And again, this is all assuming that we are back playing within a estimated amount of time. There's a chance that this gets pushed back way late. There's a chance that there's no basketball played. I mean, again, we're basically at nature and I guess society's mercy at this point, and how crazy or not crazy people want to get with whatever the hell people are going to do with their lives over the next couple of weeks, months, whatever. How does this impact the NBA draft? I mean, we could see picks get less money. I guess you'd kind of have to if the cap went down. Would the cap go down all at once? Would it be a smoothing thing? There's so there's just so much. And again, there's no how-to on how to do the right thing here. I don't know what the right thing is. I guarantee no matter what the NBA chooses to do, because eventually they're going to come to some sort of a decision about whatever, it's going to be criticized. I don't know if it's possible to have something out of all this that everybody's going to agree on, but we'll see. That's all. We'll see.